Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and we will be learning today Mi'ez Hashem Daf Vav Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Din Levishas Begadim, the halachos that pertain to getting dressed in the morning. We pick up today on the bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch Vav Amid Aleph, Siman Beis Sif Hey. So when we left off the last year, we were speaking about putting on your shoes in the morning. And we learned that you're supposed to put on the right shoe before the left shoe, but you don't tie the right shoe. You put on the right shoe, then you put on the left shoe, then you tie the left shoe, and then you tie the right shoe. And we said, why is that? Because we always give kedima to the yamin. We always give preference to the right side. Therefore, you put on the right shoe first. However, when it comes to tying, we find that the HaTorah Dirshu gave preference when it comes to tying to the left. Where do we see that? Because you tie the tefillin onto the left hand. So we put the right shoe on first to give kedima to the yamin, but now when it comes to tying, we don't tie the right shoe. Instead, we put on the left shoe, and now we give kedima to the left when it comes to tying. We tie the left shoe, and then we tie the right shoe. If you're wearing slip-on shoes, then the Mishnah Berurah told us you put on the right shoe, and then you put on the left shoe. How about when it comes to removing your shoes? Which one should you take off first? Says the Mechaber Sifhei, Kishachayletz min olav, when you remove your shoes, chaylitz shall smile tchila. You should first remove the left shoe, then remove the right shoe. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Ches, chaylitz, shezehu kvaida shall yamin. Why do you remove the left shoe first? Because by leaving the right shoe on longer, you're giving greater kavod to the right foot, because you're leaving it in the shoe longer. Now we go to Sivav, which is a very interesting sif. Says the Mechaber, Aser leilech b'kaima zekufa. One is not permitted to walk in a very upright manner. What does that mean? Person's not supposed to walk with his back nice and erect and his head up so that he's not looking down in front of his feet. Adarabah, he has his head up, looking straight ahead. Person is not supposed to walk in that manner. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Tes, B'kaim is a kufa. Person's not supposed to walk with such an erect posture. Why is this, as the Chavetz Chaim? Shedoichek ragle hashchina kaviyachol. Because, if you could even say such a thing, that's what the word means, kaviyachol. Can you really say such a thing? The reason we can't really say these kind of things is because we cannot apply, anthropomorphizing. Boy, I forgot the word. We can't, I'm laughing at myself. That's not typical for me. We cannot give over to the Rabbeinu Shalom humanistic traits. So what the Mishnah Berurah says, why can't you walk in an upright manner? Because it's as if you are pushing away the feet of the Shechina. You're being doichik the Shechina. You're pushing aside the Shechina. Now it's kaviyachol because the Rebbeinu Shalom does not have feet. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't have a guf. You cannot push the Shechina, you cannot push the Rebbeinu Shalom in any way. You cannot push the divine presence in any way. But the bottom line is that walking in this very erect manner is seen as being doichik ragle Shechina. This is taken, the source of this is a Gemara in Kedushin, Daf Lamed Aleph, where the Gemara brings Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, Aser la'adam sheyahalech arba amos b'kaim zekufa. It is forbidden for someone to walk 4 amos with an upright posture. Shenemar, because it says Meloi chal haaretz kivaydai. Since the Torah Dirshu tells us Meloi chal haaretz kivaydai, that the Rabbeinu Shalom's Shechina is Meloi chal haaretz. The Rabbeinu Shalom's Shechina is not only up in Shamayim. The Rebbeinu Shalom brings his Shechina down here as well, kaviyachol. Now, the easy way for me to give this over to you with, kind of English phraseology is, if you walk around like you own the place, right? When somebody is somewhere where he doesn't really belong and he's afraid that security might get a hold of him, what do we tell him? We say, listen, if you don't want to have a problem, just walk around like you own the place. If you walk around like you own the place, nobody challenges you. They look at you, they see that you're super confident, they figure the guy really belongs here. Well, don't walk around like you own the place. You're not allowed to walk around with a kaima zakufa. You know why? Because you don't own the place. The Rabbeinu Shalom owns the place. It's Malay Chalaretz Kevaydai. If you walk around like you own the place, Kavayachal, you're pushing away the true Balabayas. The true Balabayas is the Rabbeinu Shalom. That's one way of looking at it. In a more esoteric way of looking at it, and it's interesting because those of us who are learning Daf Yomi, we just not long ago learned all those blätter in Masechtas Chagiga that speak about the Maaseh HaMerkava and the Shechina in Shamayim and Aretz and this and that, very esoteric Gemaras. So there's a more esoteric way of understanding this as well, which is the Rabbeinu Shalom, the Makaim of the Rabbeinu Shalom, so to speak, is in the Rakia. The Gemara tells us that there are 7 Rakiyas, there might be even 8 Rakiyas, and the Kisei HaKavod and the Shechina, it's all the way up in the 7th Rakiya. But for our benefit, the Rabbeinu Shalom brings the Shechina down here. But the Shechina, so to speak, in our terms, is coming from up in Shamayim down to the Aretz. Somebody walks around with a kaima zakufa, very upright, it's as if he's pushing up against the Elyonim, and he's being doichik the raglei Shechina, the feet, so to speak, of the Shechina are coming down, but he's pushing back. He's walking with a kaimas gufa. But again, I think the easy way to understand this is, again, don't walk around like you own the place. Don't walk around with that haughtiness, because you don't own the place. And if you act that way, then you are being doichik raglei Shechina. There are also, Bali Musar say that gaiva, the Shechina, is very allergic, so to speak, to gaiva. The Shechina doesn't come with his gaiva. So if a person's a Baal gaiva, he's being doichik raglei Shechina because, so to speak, it's as if he's chasing away the Shechina with his gaiva. Of course, we can't chase away the Shechina, and of course, there's no such thing as a place where the Shechina isn't. But the bottom line is, this is all to teach you this halacha, that again, a person is supposed to be at snei aleches. He's supposed to comport himself with humbleness, modesty. Walking around b'kaim zakufa is the opposite. It's not in harmony with Shivisi Hashem L'negdi Summit, all of these concepts that we've been learning, where a person has to be mitzayir, a person has to picture himself as if he's in front of Barei Olam. So certainly to walk around with that kaima zakufa does not seem to be a person who's Shivisi Hashem L'negdi Summit and is standing in front of his Creator in a humble manner. Says the Mishnah Berurah, so we did it up. Ice cut and test. Al kain, therefore, kasva achronim, since the reason for this is because it's a lack of respect, so to speak, for the Shechina Akdoisha. Al kain kasva achronim da asar afilu pachas be'arba amos. This has nothing to do with arba amos. It's not that you're not allowed to walk arba amos b'kaim as a gufa. You're not allowed to stand b'kaim as a gufa at all. Upashat afilu aymin b'mekaimai ve'ena ha'ela klal. Person is never supposed to comport himself in that kind of haughty manner. Now, the reason why the Mishnah Berurah makes the point over here that it has nothing to do with arba amos is because of the next halacha. Let's take a look back in the Mechaber here. Bottom line, Vav Amid Aleph Sivkat and Vav. V'loi yelech, turn the page to Vav Amid Beis. V'loi yelech arba amos begiloi harosh. And a person is not allowed to walk 4 amos with an uncovered head. So, here in the beginning of Siv Vav, we had 2 halachos. The first one was, Asur leilech b'kaim zakufa. It is prohibited for somebody to walk in an excessively upright posture. And then the Mechaber said, Ve lo yelech, and one should not walk arba amos, 4 amos begilui harosh. So, what the Mishnah Berurah in Ice Cut and Yud, in Ice Cut and Test was telling us is, even though it says the second halacha, v'lo yelech arba amos begilui harosh, that you're not allowed to walk 4 amos with an uncovered head, that arba amos only goes on the second halacha. of somebody walking with a bareheaded. It does not go on the first halacha of kaima zekufa. Kaima zekufa you're not allowed to have even if you're standing still. Bareheaded, over there's an inyan of arba amis. Now we have to dive into this isser of not walking bareheaded for 4 amis. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting yod back on the bottom line of Vav Amud Aleph. First thing the Chafetz Chaim points out is, do not think that this prohibition of walking bareheaded is only under the open sky, but inside a house you're allowed to walk bareheaded. Don't think that way. Says the Chafetz Chaim, afilu bebayis sheyesh by tikra, even if you're in a house that does have a ceiling, a roof, still you're not allowed to walk dalet amos bareheaded. Certainly tachas aver hashamayim, certainly if you're under the open sky, the yesh li zaher lekule alma, then according to everyone, you have to be careful not to walk dalet amos while bareheaded. Now, why did the Mishnah Berurah see fit to mention this? Because there is a marshal that discusses this question of under the open sky, not under the open sky. Apparently, I did not see the marshal inside, but apparently within that marshal, the suggestion is made that perhaps the isser of walking bareheaded dalet amos is only under the open sky, but not inside a house. However, it seems that we come out not that way, because if you take a look at Shartzian Oiskot Yud Zayin, he says, "V'gam harashal lo yisfir alei b'maskanasai lahakil." Even the marshal, in his maskana, in his conclusion, is not makel inside a house, and says that inside the house as well, you are not allowed to walk 4 amos bareheaded. Now we turn to Vav Amud Beis. Mishnah Berurah is cutting you at Aleph. Arba amos. You're not allowed to walk 4 amos bareheaded. Says the Chafetz Chaim, Umidus chasidus. It's a midus chasidus. What does midus chasidus mean? It has nothing to do with Streimlach. It has nothing to do with Weisse Zokin. It has nothing to do with Peis. Midus chasidus means it is the midah of a chassid. What's a chassid? A chassid is somebody who does lifnim mishuras hadin, an extra pious person who comports himself even lifnim mishuras hadin. He doesn't follow the strict letter of the law when it comes to halacha. He goes even beyond the strict letter of the law, and he comports himself in an extra pious way. That's what a chassid is. Says the Mishnah Berurah here, Umidus chasidus, it's a midus chasidus, afilu pachos me'arba amos. The Mechaber said that it is forbidden to walk 4 amos begilia rosh. Okay, that's the ikar adin. What's the midus chasidus? That's lifnim mishuras hadin. Don't even walk less than 4 amos bareheaded. And continues the Chafetz Chaim, va'afilu be'es hashena balayla. And even at night while you're sleeping, it's a midus chasidus to have your head covered. So the first midus chasidus over here, that there's a midus chasidus not to walk even less than dalet amos bareheaded. If you look in the Sha'ar Tzion Yud Ches, the Mishnah Berurah brings this from a Magen Avraham. As far as to have a shluf kapel, to have your head covered even while you're sleeping, that he brings from the Shla. But what do we have so far? What we have so far is that according to the Mechaber, and he uses very strong words, the Mechaber says osir. He's calling this a prohibition. So this is not just something, it's not just a chumrah according to the Mechaber, it's osir. Leilech arba amos begilia rosh. So to walk 4 amos bareheaded, that the Mechaber is calling an isser. He's calling that a strict prohibition, not only a midus chasidus. Midus chasidus, he brings from the Magen Avraham that is a midus chasidus, that you shouldn't walk even less than 4 amos bareheaded, and he brings another midus chasidus, which is that even when you're sleeping, you shouldn't be bareheaded. And again, that's where it comes from, to have a shluf kapel, a big yarmulke that stays on your head even when you toss and turn. Okay, now let's go a little further in the Mishnah Berurah. V'yesh shemitzadidin, there are those that take the position, loymar, to say, da'afilu arba amos einoi aser medina, that even to walk dalet amos bareheaded is not really aser me'ikar adin. It's not aser medina, rak lahatznuin b'maasehen. that it's not something which strictly speaking is Aser al Pidin. It's something which is Aser for what he calls Hatsnuin b'ma'asehen, those who comport themselves with true modesty. So for such a person, he doesn't go Dal Amos while bareheaded. Aval, however, says the Chavetz Chaim, even though he did see fit to make mention of that shita, and again, that seems to come from the Marshal in Sharatzion Ois Katan Chaf. He brings this down from the Rashal. So again, we saw earlier from the Rashal the question of maybe there's a kula to go bareheaded inside a house. We said the Rashal's maskana is no, we're not makel inside a house. But over here we have a Rashal that's saying that it's not really an Isser al Pidin. Aval, however, says the Chavetz Chaim, Kvar Kosav Taz, the Taz already wrote, L'kamon b'Siman Ches, later on in Siman Ches of Katan Gimel, de Bismanenu, that in our days, Isser Gomer Midina, it's a true prohibition, me'ikar adin, Li'yois begili arosh, to be bareheaded, va'afilu yoishev bebeisai. Even if you're sitting on the couch, you're not walking, you're sitting on the couch in your house. So this is both kulas. We're going l'chumra by both possible kulas. You're inside your house, so you're not under the open sky, and you're not even walking. Forget walking less than Daled Amos. You're not walking at all. You're sitting on the couch. So the Taz says that there's an Isser Midina. Even if you're sitting still on the couch in your house, there's an Isser al Pidin to be bareheaded. Ayin Sham Hatam, he says, take a look over there at the Taz to see what his reasoning is. Now, the reasoning of the Taz is very interesting. The reasoning of the Taz is, he says it's a violation of B'chukaiseyem Loisei Leichu. The Taz says that it was a chayk of the Goyim to go bareheaded. And we know there's an Isser B'chukaiseyem Loisei Leichu. Since it's a chayk of the non-Jews to go bareheaded, a Yid is not allowed to go bareheaded. Now, what's interesting about this is the Isser of B'chukaiseyem Loisei Leichu generally applies to chukim that the Goyim have that are based on some pagan practice or some of a Zara practice. So in other words, we don't say that it's the chayk of the Goyim to wear torn jeans, and therefore you're not allowed to wear torn jeans because b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu. We don't say that it became the chayk of the non-Jews to dye their hair purple, and therefore there's an isser of b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu to dye your hair purple. No, I am not condoning anybody or suggesting to anybody that they should dye their hair purple. There's many other reasons not to dye your hair purple. But to say that it's an isser of b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu, that would seem to be a stretch. In order for it to be b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu, it would have to be some kind of a pagan ritual, some kind of an Avodah-based, Kishuv-based, something ritual, but not something that just became a fad. So the fact that the Goyim go begilui roish, is that b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu? So the latter, Achrayim and Paiskim, they speak about it, and there are different suggestions that are made. Some say that yes, in the time of the Taz, the non-Jews specifically uncovered their head out of a religious practice, and therefore the Taz considered it b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu. I believe Rav Moshe Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh L'Vrach in the Yigris Moshe writes that nowadays it's not b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu. However, the Rishiva Zatzal is very clear that you cannot be makel in this halacha of going bareheaded. He says even if it's not b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu, like the Taz suggests, the lamaisa, it's you know what? It might even be brought down. No, I don't think I saw it brought down in the Dirshu. 1 second. Yeah, he says that it is a midus chasidus that has become universally accepted, and therefore you're not allowed to go begili roish. But to say that it's b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu, that Rav Moshe seems to say that nowadays it's not really b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu. I did, however, hear another explanation of why it may indeed be b'chukaiseyem loisei leichu, and that is the following: if you take a look in the Christian practices, you'll notice that the Pope, the cardinals, The bishops, they wear yarmulkes, right? They have their heads covered. The layman does not have his head covered. Even the galach, even the priest nowadays, does a regular priest cover his head? I don't think so. But the higher ups, the bishop, the cardinal, the pope, they cover their heads. Why do they cover their heads? The reason they cover their heads, believe it or not, is for the same reason that we cover our heads. Why do we cover our heads? We wear a yarmulke. What's a yarmulke? Funny word. Yarmulke. What's yarmulke? Yorei malka. Fear of the king. The reason we wear a yarmulke, the reason we don't go begilui rosh, is it the same Gemara? 1 second. Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua. It's also Gemara Kedusha Laman Aleph Aman Aleph. Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua loy maskia arba amos begilui rosh. Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua said, I never go 4 amos without gilui rosh. Why? Amar shchina lamayla me roshi. Because it's a recognition that the divine presence is above me. The reason you wear a yarmulke is to acknowledge and signify that there is something above that you are in fear of. Yiras shamayim. So yorei malka, yarmulke, that's where it comes from. They also wear a yarmulke in order to acknowledge that there is something above. But they wear it. The layman does not wear it. You know why? Because their shita is that level of yiras shamayim, so to speak, is not for the layman. It's not for the hamoinam. The hamoinam, the plebeians, they're not required to have that level of fear of heaven. That's for the upper echelon. That's for the elites. The elites go ahead. They have the yiras shamayim, and in their whole dogma, they get forgiveness for you. And the layman can go do what he wants, give a nice donation, and everything will be fine. But it is for religious reasons that they do not cover their heads. They specifically do not cover their heads because of this dogma that they somehow are not obligated to have that level of yiras shamayim that would fit with them covering their heads. Only the elites in the church have that level of yiras shamayim. We certainly don't believe that. There's no difference between one yid and another yid and another yid. Every single one of us is mechuyev to have yiras shamayim, and therefore every single one of us wears a yarmulke. But in any case, so we have over here, the Mishnah Berurah has the Taz, Aval Kfar Kosav HaTaz L'Kabal M'Siv Kesef Gimel, De Bizmanenu Isser Gomer Medina Liyos Begilui Rosh Afil Yosh B'Beisai. Nowadays, it's an Isser Gomer to be Begilui Rosh. Person is never supposed to be Begilui Rosh. Ayin Shamatam. V'chei Kosav B'Tshuvas Mahari Baroina. The Kosav HaMagen Avram, the Magen Avram writes, Tafilu Ketanim, even minor children. Nochain Lahargilam B'Kisui Rosh. We have to get them into the habit of always having Kisui Rosh. So that you should always have yiras shamayim. K'de'isa, like it says in the Gemara, Shabbos Kuf Nun Vav Amud Beis, Kasi Reishech, cover your head, so that you should always have yiras shamayim. V'da'oid, and you should know furthermore, Del'inyan Gilui Arosh, when it comes just to the question of Gilui Arosh. And what the Mishnah Berurah means over here is just this concept of always having Kisui Rosh because of yiras shamayim, and therefore you're never supposed to be Begilui Rosh. The Indian Gilui Rosh, for this, Dai B'Kisei Yad Al Rosh. It suffices to put your hand on your head, because the purpose of the yarmulke is to acknowledge and to remind you that there's something above and you have to have yiras shamayim. If you place your hand on your head, you are also acknowledging your yiras shamayim and your acceptance of the idea that there is something above. V'hu adin, and now these two words v'hu adin are a little tricky. I think the words v'hu adin are here because they're a quote from the Pri Megadim. V'hu adin im mefala roishai shari begilui rosh. Also, if somebody has to delouse his head, he's allowed to be Begilui Arosh because that's not a kula in Yerushalayim. The reason your head is uncovered is because your head has to be uncovered, like you're in the shower. Vayin b'pri begadim, but take a look at the pri begadim. Shekasav delelech arba amis takas avir shamayim. But to go dalet amas under the open sky, loy mahani bazeh kisi arosh biyad. The pri begadim says that there is an extra chumrah. We saw a possibility. We saw a havamina that the Rashal would be makel in a house as opposed to under the open sky. We said that Lamaskana we don't apply that kula, and you're not allowed to be Begilui Rosh even inside a house. Over here, the Pri Begadim does differentiate between inside the house and under the open sky, and that is as far as covering your head with your hand. We said that really covering your head with your hand suffices to show you're a Shamayim. We're going to see it does not suffice to make a bracha, to say Hashem's name. For those things, covering your head with your hand does not suffice. But just to show you're a Shemayim, it does suffice. But the Pri Begadim says not to go dalet amas outside under the open sky. For that, it's not enough. And it seems that there is a greater feeling of hefkerus. If you're walking outside in public under the open sky and you do it Begilui Rosh, that gives a greater feeling of hefkerus than it does if you're inside the house. Ice cutting your bays, says the Chavetz Chaim Begilui Rosh, v'cholshkein, sha'asa levarech, you're certainly not allowed to make a bracha Begilui Rosh, v'huadin lilmoid Begilui Rosh, or to learn Torah, to recite words of Torah Begilui Rosh, v'loi mahani bazeh kisui hayad. And the Mishnah Berurah brings down from the Taz and from the Magen Avraham, you can see that in the Sharet Tzion, that for making a bracha, or for learning Torah, covering you with your hand does not suffice. To yod for roish chad gufa inun, because the head and the hand are all part of one guf. Ve'ena guf yachal achasei sisatzmai, and the guf cannot cover itself. That's not called a covering. The covering has to be something that's external to the guf. The hand is not external to the guf. It's part of the guf. So according to this, somebody wakes up in the middle of the night and his yarmulke has fallen off and he doesn't know where it is, and he wants to take a drink of water. He can't go cover up his head with his arm, make a bracha, and take a drink of water. He has to use something external to his guf. However, the Mishnah Berurah does say, and he brings this down from the Eliyah Rabbah, V'yesh makilum bazeh b'shas adchak. The Eliyah Rabbah, there are those who are mekel b'shas adchak. Kigoin, for example, the scenario I just gave you. Palayla, somebody wakes up in the middle of the night, she writes a lishtais ve'likayva b'roishay. He wants to take a drink and he doesn't have a yarmulke. The Eliyah Rabbah is mekel and says it suffices to cover your head with your hand. However, it would be better to be noyeg the way the Welt is noyeg, says the Chavetz Chaim. You take the sleeve of the pajamas or the robe, ala yad, you pull it, over your arm and your hand, or and you use that to cover your hand. Because then you're covering your head with the beged. You're not doing it with your hand. Now it's very interesting. Something just struck me over here, and it might require a little additional research on my part. 1 second. I might have to look up a Bach. See, I'm just wondering like this. I'll think out loud. You'll get a window on what the preparation is like. I'm thinking out loud. If you pay attention to what the Mishnah Berurah just said, the Mishnah Berurah said you should be noyeg like the Welt is noyeg. Now, what do? Shemamshich habeis yad shel habeged. They pull the sleeve of the beged al hayad onto their hand. Umechasa by roishay. Sounds like what they do is this: they have a sleeve. They take the sleeve, they pull the sleeve onto their hand, and then they go like that. Now, why do you have to do that? Why do you have to pull the sleeve onto the hand and cover your head that way? Why can't you just do this? It didn't strike me before, but now it's striking me. And what I am wondering, this is a Bach in Sadik Aleph. I don't have the right volume of Shulchan Aruch here. I'm going to have to look it up. What I'm wondering now is, maybe the reason for that is very simple. The Mishnah Berurah just finished saying that you cannot cover your head with your hand because your head and your hand are chad gufa, and the guf cannot cover itself with itself. You need something external to the guf. Therefore, you need a beged. Now, here's the interesting question. If you do this, is that called that you're covering your head with your beged, or the beged is bottled to your arm? And when you do this, you're actually considered covering your head with your arm, which is not acceptable. But if you do this, and you pull it to your hand, over here the sleeve is not bottled to the hand. You know why? Because it's not made to cover the hand. I'm not using the sleeve now in the way the sleeve was meant to be used. I'm kind of using the sleeve as a glove. So this is not bottled to my hand. So when I do this, I'm covering my head with my beged. But when I do this, I may possibly be covering my head with my arm. That's what I'm wondering right now. I want to see if anybody says that. And I want to look up the Bach. But that's what's striking me right now. That it's not okay to just use the robe or the pajama sleeve that's on your arm, because that would be bottled to the arm, and that would be considered covering your head with your arm. You got to pull the sleeve onto your hand so that the sleeve should not be bottled to the guf, and now you're covering your head with your beged. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter. Because of a Pri Begadim, the Pri Begadim then writes, you have to be very careful when you put on your tefillin shel rosh, that you don't end up making the bracha with your head uncovered. Many people, they take the shel rosh, they want to put it onto their head, they take the talus and the yarmulke off, and they're affixing the tefillin to their head. And look at this, you could end up make a bracha begilui harosh. So you have to make sure you shouldn't make the bracha begilui harosh. Uparuk misa'aros. How about a toupee? Right? Somebody like me could use a toupee. Uparuk misa'aros. If somebody's wearing a toupee, does that constitute a yarmulke? How about it? It has a net underneath it, so the hair is actually affixed to a beged. Yesh lesar neimaris ayin. He brings down over here from the Pri Begadim that should not be treated as a yarmulke. You cannot make a bracha or go dalan amos wearing just that toupee because of maris ayin. Sheyarmu shesa'arei saying people will say you're not wearing a yarmulke. The yesh bekilin, however, he brings down from the Artzas Achayim that you could be making. Okay, now let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch, top line, Vav Amud Beis. Says the Mechaber, V'yivdoik nikavav. So we have been speaking over here so far, right? The Siman was called Din Levishas Begadim. So we're dealing with somebody who woke up in the morning. We discussed how he should get dressed, that he should make sure to keep his guf covered. From there, we segued into putting on shoes and the need to wear a yarmulke. You shouldn't go with an uncovered head. And we spoke about not walking b'kayim zekufa. Now, the Mechaber kind of continues to the next step in the morning. The yivdaik nekavav. A person should be baidik. He should go check to see if he needs to use the facilities. Does he have the need to defecate? Says the Mishnah Berurah Cut Yud Gimel. The yivdaik nekavav. Why is this so critical? Kedei sheyeh achakach gufay noki, so that he should have a guf noki, he should have a clean guf, b'shas kabolos malchus shamayim b'kriyah shema utfila. When he's b'kabel ol malchus shamayim when he says kriyah shema, and when he gets up to Shemona Esrei and he's bispal. We know that the pasuk in Tehillim says, Baruchi nafshi es Hashem v'chol karoivai Hashem kachoi. All of your innards, your entire body is involved in tefillah, is involved in Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shamayim. Now, your body cannot be fully involved in Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shamayim and in Tefillah if it's full of schmutz, if it's dirty, if you're tzarech l'nekavav, if you need to use the facilities, then you don't have a guf naki. If you don't have a guf naki, then your guf cannot be fully involved in Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shamayim and in Tefillah. So therefore you have to be baidik, nikavav. You have to go check to see if you need to use the facilities. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ve'ein tzarich rak bedika levad. However, the Mishnah Berurah cautions us not to become OCD about this. You need bedika. You need to check. Ve'em badak esatzmai, if you did check, ve'ein roitza atal nikavav, and right now, l'maisa, there's no need. Zen nikra minadin guf naki. That's called guf naki. The chalila la'acher shuv avur zezman kriya shema ayafilu rak tefila b'tzibur. You don't get crazy about it and say, oh, I'm not sure. Maybe it's coming. Maybe it's not. I don't know. I have to wait a half an hour. And then you miss my kriya shema, you miss my tefila, you miss tefila b'tzibur. No, you go, you try. There's no need. There's no need. The Aruch HaShulchan, in his way, he says like this. The Yivdaik Nekavav Kaidam Atfila, a person has to check to see if he needs the facilities before he comes to davening. Damar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yechanan quotes the Gemara Brachos Tesvav Amin Aleph. Haroitza lekabel olav malchus shamayim shlema. If somebody wants to be mekayim, being mekabel ol malchus shamayim in the complete fashion, yifneh, he should first use the facilities. V'yital yadav, then he should wash his hands. V'yaniach tefillin, and he should put on tefillin. V'yikra kriyishma lein kriyishma, v'yispal, and then daven. V'yesh lahadam lahanik atzmai, and the person should put himself in the practice, lifnai spaiker v'erev, to go to use the facilities both in the morning and in the evening. V'hu zihirus uzirizos unikius. Wow, you can become 3 levels of Besuls Yisharim here. It's zihirus, to make sure that you're not doing anything wrong, because it would be an avla to daven, the guf that's not naki. Uzirizus, it's also zirizus, because you're being zariz to go do the mitzvah in a positive manner, in the proper way. Unikius, and certainly it's nikius. It says Aruch HaShulchan, ve'enloi elarak livdoik es atzmai. All you need to do is go check. Avalin badak ve'enamai saris yoytze. But if you did, and nothing is coming, av shelafi dimyoinoi tzarech lazeh, even though in your mind you still feel like there's really something there, there's really a need to go, but nothing's happening now. Mekamaka mikri guf naki. That's called guf naki and mekoyev lispal. And you go daven. V'chas v'shalom lavros my kriyish ma'bet nezeh. V'loi nitna Torah lamalachei ashares. The Torah was not given to malachim. The Torah was given to bnei enosh, to a mensch. Umalar lasois, and there's nothing else for him to do. V'rabim toyim bazeh. Alkein yesh la'aziram. Many people make a mistake with this, and therefore you should instruct them that they should act in the proper manner. Okay. Says the Ramah, top line, Vav Amid Beis. Haga, v'yechase kol gufay, a person should cover up his entire guf. We already learned those halachos about covering up the guf. V'yelo yelech yachef, and a person should not go barefooted. V'yargal atzmai liftay spike of erev, a person should train himself to be in the habit of trying to use the facilities in the morning and in the evening. Shehu zrizus unikius. Interesting, the Ramah doesn't say zahirus. He just says zrizus unikius. Mishnah Berurah is cutting your dalid yachef. A person should not go barefoot. Amru Chazal. The Chazal tell us, Sheyimkar Adam Kol Ma Sheyesh Lo, a person should sell everything that he has, V'yikach Min Olam L'Raglav, and he should buy shoes. It's very dangerous to walk around without shoes, especially when people get older, or people have certain infirmities like diabetes. You get the wrong kind of cut on your foot, you get an infection, Chas v'Chalila, it could become very dangerous. So a person should always be in the habit of walking around with shoes. In Arabian areas where the minig is to go barefoot, shari it's mutter. Sometimes people would go barefoot as a means to tshuva. That would also be mutter. Okay, we have a few more minutes, so let's start Siman Gimel. Hanhagas Beis HaKisei, the manner in which one is supposed to comport himself when using the Beis HaKisei, Ubay Yud Zayin Seifim, and we have here 17 Seifim. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph, Kishi Kanis LeBeis HaKisei, when somebody is about to enter the Beis HaKisei, Yaimar, you should say, Hiskabdu Michupadim. You should be honored. Be honored, O honored ones. V'achshav lo nagul amrei, and nowadays we do not have the minig to say this. What is going on here? What's the basis for this? Well, a person, a yid, is accompanied by malachim, right? Ki malachav yitzav alach l'shmarka b'chol drachecha. The person, the Rabbanu Shalom, appoints malachim to guard you, to watch you. Famous zog from Klausenberger Rebbe, Zechat Tzaddik Kadosh Livracha. Klausenberger Rebbe said, anybody who survived Auschwitz had to have 2 malachim with him. He said, Tzvai malaluchim, an F Shemer, maybe even more, who had to walk with him constantly, on a constant basis, to see to it that he should survive. So a yid is accompanied by malachim. The malachim don't go into the Beis HaKisei. So before you go into the Beis HaKisei, you have to take leave and ask pardon of the malachim. So you tell the malachim, Hiskabdu michubadim, be honored, O honored ones. Excuse me for a moment. And you go into the Beis HaKisei, and then you come back. But the Mechaber says, "V'achshav lo nagul amrei." Nowadays we do not know to say this. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Aleph, Ki ein anu mechuzakin liyirei shamayim shemalachim alav noisanu. Halavai that we should be on the level of yirei shamayim, that the malachim accompany us. Unfortunately, we're not muchzik to be yirei shamayim that should be accompanied by malachim. Shenavakshem she'amtinu aleinu ad shenetzei, that we should ask them to wait for us until we come out. Also interesting, I mentioned the Klausenberger Rebbe and malachim. I heard from Klausenberger Rebbe once, he said that when a yid has a geschäft, a yid has a business, a yid has a store, and somebody comes in to buy from him, it's not because he did a good marketing campaign, it's not because he scoped out the perfect location on the avenue, it's because 2 malachim brought him into the store, showed him the merchandise, and convinced him to buy it. That's why this yid came into your store and bought merchandise. I once told this over. I was making a chasana for one of my children, and I forgot to purchase wine for the chasana. The morning of the chasana, I was in Brooklyn, and one of the items on my shopping list was I always buy a beautiful leather-bound tehillim for the kala. So I went out to go get the tehillim for the kala, and I was buying it. I think I was looking by Zundel Berman in Borough Park, which is located on the corner of 17th and 46th Street. Now, everybody knows it's very hard to find parking around there. So where did I find parking? I went up 46th Street to 18th Avenue. I made a right on 18th Avenue, and I found a parking spot between 46th and 47th on 18th. Okay. I went, I bought my tillim, I came back to the car. I'm about to get in the car, and I look, and I see a wine store. It's a Yiddish wine store right there. I parked right in front of the wine store. And I said, hey, I forgot to buy wine. I went in, and I bought several cases of wine. And the Yid looked at me, and he said, I don't remember ever seeing you here before. You walk in Blitzik the first time, and you're making this whole, big purchase of wine. So I told him, I said, this is Mamish Klausenberger Rebbe. Klausenberger Rebbe says, a Yid comes in to buy in your store, it's not because of anything else. It's because 2 malachim brought him to the store. I said, malachim brought me to the store. I had to be by Zundel Berman. I needed a parking spot. They had me park right in front of your store. The Rebbeinu Shalom wanted you to make a nice sale today. That's why you made this sale. So that's what it is. So yes, a Yid is accompanied by malachim, and halavai, we should be zaychet to be muchzik, to be yirei shamayim, that malachim taka go with us out in the gas. And we'll stop over here with Sif Beis. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh should say Yeshua's refuas parnasa sheduchim to all those in need, and we should be zaychet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek b'mheriv Yameinu. Amen. Be well.